Greetings, everybody. I am the Starving Martian, and welcome to Thought Bubbles, where I share my thoughts on a random comic book. And today, we're going to talk a little bit about Jason Todd. Specifically, I want to ask you the question, who is Jason Todd? What can you tell me about him? Now, most people, if you know anything about Batman history, if you know anything about Jason Todd at all, when you mention his name, almost immediately he's connected with his own death, with his own brutal murder at the hands of the Joker. Even if you enjoy the more recent comics with the Red Hood, you accept that you wouldn't have that character without the death of Jason Todd. That whole character's basis is coming back from the dead. So whether you just like the classic comics, whether you're into the more modern Bat family, Jason Todd is and shall always be associated with his death at the hands of the Joker. And it's kind of sad because I find he's actually a pretty cool character in his own right. And you don't find a lot of collected editions, and that's mostly what I read, mostly what I collect is the collected editions, the graphic novel editions. You'll notice when I do my Mars Attacks reviews, I use floppy over-the-counter comics instead of that, but for the most part, like when I'm looking at my DC and my Marvel comics, I like them in collected, and so you don't see a whole lot of Jason Todd, who he is before the crowbar messes his face up, and so thought we'd remedy that situation today by taking a look at a collection of comics actually featuring Jason Todd early in his crime-fighting career. This is a collection known as Batman Second Chances. It's been out for a few years, maybe 3 or 4, and it's still readily available online. I think you might even find it in bookstores if you look, like a Barnes & Noble. But I picked this thing up off of Amazon because it is a couple bucks cheaper doing it that way. And so right on the cover here we have a nice shot of Batman's car getting its tires boosted by this little street urchin, and that of course is Jason Todd. Now, when Jason Todd first debuted to replace Dick Grayson as Robin, he wasn't a street thief. He was in fact a circus performer, very much like Dick Grayson, and then Crisis on Infinite Earths happened. And everything got rebooted, and they said, let's make this his own character. They can make him interesting, give him a little something to set him apart. And they did, and some fans liked it, and some fans hated it, and many fans voted him dead. So, there's a warning in there for you. So, anywho, we see that this contains Batman, issue 402 and 403. Then we jump to issue 408, all the way down to 416. So it's a good number of comics in here, and then part of an annual. So the first story is a 2-part story about Batman facing off against a Batman impersonator. It's okay. It's pretty good. Nothing special. You'll see that, by the way, it was just called Batman at the time. Now we're going to, after that story, we jump a few issues to what is now being called Batman The New Adventures. And there's that same cover we looked at before. And this is where Jason gets his brand new origin. It also explains where Dick Grayson went, why Dick Grayson is no longer Robin, and as we see over here, it involves the Joker, because of course it does, because everything has to involve the Joker, because there's some kind of legal requirement, I guess. Anywho, so this issue and the one after it see Dick Grayson getting wounded by the Joker, Batman telling him it's time to cool his heels. He leaves all in a huff, and goes off and starts doing his Nightwing thing with the Teen Titans, and then Batman's all like, maybe I, could use a Robin around. I don't know. Maybe somebody who steals wheels from the Batmobile is good for a Robin. Give it a try. Actually, he doesn't immediately adopt him. It's interesting. You'll find he actually starts off by sending him to this little school for boys, but it turns out that the lady who runs it is a master criminal, and she's teaching all her students how to steal for her, and then they get a cut of the profit. Not the best place for a young man to grow up. So, so Batman tries not to, bring him into the fold at first, but then he helps bust up this ring of criminals, and Batman figures, okay, maybe this kid's got something. And so he's brought into the cave. Now, after that, we get another two-part story, this one featuring Two-Face, who, by the way, in this comic is shown to be Batman's smartest arch nemesis ever. He pulls a daylight heist at one point because he's like, wait a minute, Batman never comes out in the daylight. Sweet. And it's just such a stupid and obvious way to get around the issue of committing a crime in Gotham without Batman beating you up. And I'm surprised either he or nobody else ever does that again. But brilliant, Two-Face. Absolutely brilliant. This is the story where we find out that Jason's father, who was a two-bit crook, actually worked for Two-Face at one point, and Two-Face had him murdered. They would actually use this origin for Jason Todd for the Tim Drake character on Batman the Animated Series in Season 4. Also in the movie Batman Forever, even though they mostly stuck with Dick Grayson's origin, it is Two-Face that kills his parents there. So this story has traveled around a bit, gotten into quite a few different adaptations. Alright, and then after that we just go into some, case of the week kind of stories. The following stories don't set up anything grand. They're not all that important, we'll say, to the big scheme, but they're the fun kind of stories that you just enjoy reading. Here's one that features the Mime. It's introducing the Mime. And when it says introducing, it means, as far as I could tell, her only comic book appearance, although if you blink and miss her, she is actually in the Batman Lego movie. They made a Batman Lego minifigure out of her. And so there's our friend Jason swinging around, having a good time, enjoying himself. And he does. He loves being Robin. And so this is just a goofy, fun little story. I do quite enjoy it. Let's see. Yeah. And then there's Mom's stage. And it's followed up by this guy here. A story about a ghost in a samurai costume in a museum that all it needs is Ace the Bat Hound to be an issue of Scooby-Doo. It's pretty forgettable. This one, however, a story called Victims, is really dark, really gruesome. If you like your Batman comics like gritty, this is what you want. By the way, this particular issue has art by Jim Aparo, one of my favorite Batman artists of all time. I grew up reading these things in the 90s, so I was used to him and his art. Yeah, for me, his Batman is Batman. This is how the Dark Knight looks. This story doesn't even feature Robin in it, which is good because the kid would like vomit. It's for its time, pretty gruesome affair. And immediately that's followed up with week 2 of Millennium. It was a crossover story that everybody in DC had to take part in. Now this story is interesting for Jason Todd because there's a sequence where he's been sent by Batman to find the Scarecrow's location, but he's just supposed to tag him and report in. Don't confront him. Don't let him know you're there. Just tell me where he is. Instead, he takes the Scarecrow down with some negative side effects, and it just shows his impulsiveness. It shows his recklessness, and it's an early indication of the behavior that will eventually lead to his murder. So, some plot development there, some character growth, and speaking of, the first Robin Nightwing team-up ever is also presented here. And we get to see Nightwing and Robin fighting together in Nightwing's old 70s high collar. Dorky by any standards, but especially by today's costume. And we also get to see an emotional reunion between him and Batman, who apparently haven't spoken in like 18 months. So they have a bit of a falling out and a coming together, and they reach an understanding without ever acknowledging it, I guess is the best way to put it. And so this book's great for Nightwing fans because, you know, it shows how he got out of being Robin, and it shows his first emotion-filled confrontation with Bruce. And just really well done. And it concludes with the Batman Annual I mentioned. Villains in Love. This had 2 stories in it initially. It only reprints 1 here. Unfortunately, it reprints the Penguin story. I much prefer the Clayface one. That one was just crazy insane about Clayface 3 and his love for his bride, who's a mannequin. But Penguin story is okay too. I do want to know what jail allows this outfit, complete with gloves and bow tie. Whatever. And so that's about it. So it's just, if you want to see Jason Todd, you know, as Robin before things go haywire, and this is one of the best ways to do so. Now, I showed you and I mentioned that this skips over a few issues. I think it has issue 402 and 403. Then it skips to 408. And that's another reason this is important, just from a comic book history perspective, is because in those missing issues, you know, in the issues that aren't printed here, do you know what takes place? You know what happens? Riddle me this! I'll give you 1 hint. That's 1 hint. 1 hint. What? Nah, never mind. That's right, it's, boom, Batman Year 1. And so, if you want to know why Batman Year 1 took people by surprise, if you want to know why it became the phenomenon that it did, just comparing this story and this artwork and you know, these issues with those around it will give you an idea of how different and how unique Year 1 was when it came out. Now here's a classic image of Batman summoning these bats. Here he is, like, punching police officers in the gut. Now compare Batman punching police officers in the gut to Batman lounging on Jim Gordon's couch. Just look at him there. It's like, hey, Jimmy boy, how you doing? So you'll see that Year 1 definitely had a tone and a feel all of its own. That and when you compare it to what you see in here, what was going on in comics at the time, yeah, there definitely was a bit of a difference. So, for any Robin lovers, any Nightwing lovers, or anybody who just enjoys an obscure bit of Batman history, I definitely recommend Batman Second Chances. Like I said, you could probably still find it in stores. If not, online is your way to go. But until next time, guys, this has been the Starving Martian. Hope that this was enjoyable and informative for you. We'll catch you next week. Until then, though, as I always say, keep watching the skies.